Now, before the advent of Bestials and the new branded Despia strategy now starting to take over Master Duel, I was planning on recording a Swordsoul video, and it would be a shame for that footage to go to waste, so we are still going to go ahead and deal with it. This footage is from the previous season, but still, I don't think very much has changed for Swordsouls. They're not really super impacted by the recent decks coming in. It's still sort of doing its own thing. I think it's going to continue to be just as viable. Now, the replays you're going to see are from last season. They're not super out of date or anything, still pretty good demonstrations of what the deck can do, but we will be experimenting more with it as we travel into this new era of Master Duel, or at least what hopefully is a new era of Master Duel. So we're going to be doing a deck profile at the end of the video, showing off a couple of replays here in between. If that's something you're interested in, stick around and like the video if you enjoy watching. Subscribe for more. Let's get into the gameplay. Alrighty, getting into game number 1 then. This is going to be a nice, quick and easy one here. We're going to start off with Swordsoul Emergence. There goes an Ash Blossom. Now, what we do is we decide to hit him with Call by the Grave here. Because of course we need Emergence to resolve, but it also means that on the off chance he has a second Ash Blossom, he cannot use it next turn to negate our Max C, which suits us greatly. So we're going to negate that Ash Blossom. Emergence is going to grab us Swordsoul of Mo Yi, normal summon Mo Yi, revealing a worm in hand to special summon a Swordsoul token. That's going to trigger them summoning Halfness out from their hand. They are in fact playing Tearlaments. We decide we're not going to use Max C just yet on the off chance he doesn't actually mill anything useful, but unfortunately, out comes the Agido. We're going to follow up the Agido with a Max C just to deter him from special summoning anything fancy during our turn. We are going to mill 5 from the top of each player's deck, scream grabbing him a Sullic from his deck. Now we're going to use Heavenly Dragon Circle, which we milled thanks to his cards, to grab ourselves an Ashuna directly from the deck before synchro summoning into Swordsoul's Grandmaster Tenyi. Tenyi's going to grab us a Swordsoul card of our choice, and Mo Yi is going to allow us to draw a card. Keldo is going to return the Dora back to our deck, as well as a couple of his cards. Mudora doing very much the same thing, emptying out the graveyards as much as our opponent possibly can, which makes total sense when you consider the fact that we're probably playing Protoss, and they know that. They're trying to mitigate the possibility of a Protoss summon, but we've got more than enough attributes at our disposal. We're going to go Swordsoul Strategist, discarding a Worm Monster to special summon itself out to the field alongside a token. We're going to go into the Sinister Sovereign. Now, you can go into Baron de Fleur, you can go into Tenyi, of course, but we chose the Sinister Sovereign because it has a really good matchup against Tearlaments in particular. It gets 2 interruptions per turn instead of 1, and it banishes cards, basically, on a more active basis. So that's why I prefer using the Sinister Sovereign against Tearlaments in particular. Then basically we just summon Protoss. Protoss locks him out of Dark Monsters, and GG's. Tearlaments can't play the game. There you go. Super straightforward showing of what the main combo is. Normal Mo Yi, token, Tenyi, grab the Strategist, discard for Strategist, summon out a level 10 synchro of your choice. Then you've got 2 big interruptions, plus whatever else you may have access to, in most cases a Protoss. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Let's get into game 2. Alright, getting into game 2 here. We are in a very similar position. Like I said, this deck is cookie cutter. You really just want to make the similar sort of plays. They go Halfness. We've got double Max C here though. Double Max C, we can drop this card. They are going to hit us with an Imperm though, so that's going to slow us down quite massively. We really need to draw a good enough card off of Max C here in order to continue the duel. They're going to mill out a Siren. We top deck into Taya, which isn't the greatest card in the world to top deck, considering we've already used our normal summon. They are going to fusion summon in the Kikalos though. That is going to grab us Ecclesia. Again, not all that useful right this second. We're going to have to just set a card and pass, banking on the Maxi and the Imperm to carry us through this turn. We are going to go with the Maxi right away. Just again, hopefully to scare him out of summoning, because we don't actually need any more cards here. We just need him to not win the game. So hopefully Maxi will dissuade him from doing so. He's going to go Rhino Heart and Scream here. That's going to mill out a whole bunch of cards, triggering Sullic to grab himself a Halfness, adding it to his hand. Now he's going to go to Battle Phase. He did not want to play in the Maxi, and understandably so. So he's simply going to swing in, take his damage, and pass turn. That is exactly what we wanted, because now the initiative is ours, and we can really turn this game around. We're going to start with Ecclesia. You can special summon Ecclesia to your field as long as your opponent has more monsters than you. So we're going to summon her out. That is going to trigger their Scream, but you know, it sucks to suck. Sometimes it just be like that. They are going to summon Havness as well from the hand. Havness comes out, mill the top 3 of the deck, milling a Keldo, among other things. They got a Keldo, a Kelbeck, and DD Crow. So they got a whole bunch of really good mills there. They're going to trigger off Kelbeck in the grave. We're going to trigger the effect of the Mo Yi. They're going to try and imperm us again. We're going to counter their imperm with an imperm of our own, negating the Kikalos and also their infinite impermanence. So our Mo Yi will resolve, milling another 5 cards from the top of each player's deck. We're going to summon a token. Their Sulik and their Keldo are both going to resolve. They're going to banish Keldo to return a bunch of our cards back to our deck. Very smart to get rid of Ashuna and the quick play spell, which has a graveyard effect. Very smart from our opponent. They're going to recycle their own field spell. We're just going to synchro summon into the Shizao. That gives us at least the most powerful monster on the field, tying with our Kikalos because of Scream. We are going to get searching here as well. Draw 1 and then search with our Grandmaster. So we're going to drop an Adara to the graveyard. We're going to summon out our Strategist. Sorry, I'm tripping over all of these Chinese names. So we're going to summon it, Strategist, use its effect to bring out the Ching Ying. So now we're in control here. We're going to inflict 1200 points of damage to our opponent. They're going to go Medora to remove a bunch of elements from our graveyard, which, a little unfortunate, but not the worst thing in the world. They did, however, banish a Medora like a moron, meaning we can use our Ching Ying to banish their Kikalos and the Keldo in their grave. Normal summon the Taya, banishing the Strategist from the graveyard to bring out another token, going into the Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, Taya then milling a card out from the deck, special summoning Protos, going into the battle phase, taking out Havness, boosting up our attack points, and then swinging in the Rhino Heart, 34 over the Rhino Heart, 33 with the Ching Ying, and 23 with the Grand Master. There you go. They interrupted us turn 1, luckily we had the double maxi to sort of see us through until the next turn. And we managed to pull out a win against Tearlaments twice in a row. Let's get into game 3. Alright, our third and final game here kicking off. We are going second this time, which, you know, is a good and a bad thing. Our opponent's playing Tri-Brigades. They're going to discard Fractal, sending Kit. Kit send their Vol, and their Vol search out Fractal instead of Karass, which is interesting, assuming they already have then a Karass in their hand. They're going to summon out a Scarclaw Astro from the deck here so they can go into Lightheart. Lightheart's going to grab them their field spell, of course. The field spell on activation is going to grab them a Scarclaw monster like Reichhardt. Basically, this is just a different version of Tearlaments, right? I mean, it's all the same lore. Special summoning Reichhardt out to the field. Reichhardt then grabbing them Arrival. Arrival, well, first of all, they're going to link summon into Scarclaw Triheart, which is their big boss monster. So long as this guy's face up, all monsters are switched to defense, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, all face up monsters on the field are changed to defense, and he's unaffected by monsters in defense. So we're going to need to find another way around this Scarclaw here. It's going to be a bit of a tough one. We are going to simply have to try our best. Arrival then summoning back the Reichhardt from the graveyard, boosting up his monster as much as he possibly can. We draw into the Strategist, so this is a pretty solid hand. Normal summoning Mo Yi. Mo Yi then revealing the Adara to summon out a token. He's got the Imperm though. Imperm, we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to go the Heavenly Dragon Circle, tributing off our Mo Yi to try and search our deck for another Worm monster, but he's got an Ash Blossom too. He manages to stop both. However, because Mo Yi is no longer on the field, the Effect Veiler will not negate its effect to summon the token. So at the very least, we still get our token. Ecclesia then summoning itself, tributing itself off to bring out a Taya. Taya then banishing a monster from the graveyard to summon another token. So we can synchro summon off into the Grand Master. So unlike Baguska, he's not negating our effects, he is simply unaffected by them. So we do get the mill card off of our Taya, and our Grandmaster does get to search our deck for another Swordsoul or Worm monster. So we grab our Swordsoul Emergence. So yes, it searches for a Swordsoul card. Our Strategist is going to summon itself out to the field as well as a token before our Emergence grabs us the Protos. We're going to go into Baron de Fleur here. Baron de Fleur, of course, having the ability to pop a card once per turn. We're going to inflict 1200 points of damage to our opponent here after destroying the field spell. Ashuna now banishing itself from the grave to bring out Shifana. We're going to banish from the graveyard to summon out the Protos. Protos then activating, popping all the dark monsters and preventing the summoning of more dark monsters before the Yang Zing was going to bounce his Acro back to his deck. Now, unfortunately, we didn't really have a way to get rid of the Triheart, but we do have Blackout face down. All we need him to do is put another monster or another card on his field. He plays the Reichhardt now. So now he's going to play the Reichhardt. Going to grab Scarclaw Splash, which is a weird name, but that's fine. And we're going to go Blackout here, attempting to destroy his cards, but unfortunately he's able to protect himself with the Scarclaw arrival in the graveyard, which I didn't anticipate, admittedly. That was my bad. We're going to go Grandmaster, activating his effect, banishing the Blackout to negate the Tri-Heart. Of course, our objective isn't to negate the Tri-Heart because it's unaffected. It's more so to banish the Blackout. Blackout then giving us a token. Now that we've got a normal monster, we can use Adara to grab back our Mo Yi. Using Heavenly Dragon Circle, we can banish it from our graveyard, grabbing the Vishuda. This is what our goal was. Our goal was to try and set up the Vishuda in such a fashion that we are able to use it. We're going to bring out Monk of the Tenyi now after popping our token. We're really just trying to bait out this negate, honestly. I really wanted him to use this, but he just wouldn't use it on anything. We dropped the Vishuda to the graveyard, summoning out the Strategist. Then we're going to use our Sinister Sovereign here. 1200 points of damage to the opponent of the game. We're going to go Shaman of the Tenyi. Shaman of the Tenyi discarding a card to revive the Monk back from the graveyard. We're going to go into the battle phase, swinging with Monk of the Tenyi. Then the Shaman's effect will activate to pop the Tri-Heart. That was our next potential out. He is, however, going to use Infinite Impermanence on Shaman of the Tenyi. That is going to hurt us massively because now we don't even have a normal monster on board to use the Vishuda with anymore. So our plan was trying to basically get that to work. If that didn't work, using the Vishuda, but that particular line of play was crushed by our opponent. Very, very unfortunate. We are, however, going to start banishing his monsters, inflicting burn damage slowly but surely to our opponent by banishing all of his cards. The Sinister Sovereign is, of course, going to be somewhat useful in this matchup. Because Clash sends itself as cost, unfortunately, it can't be stopped by the Sinister Sovereign. He's going to go Max C on our Ecclesia. Ecclesia is going to try and summon a Swordsoul from the deck. We're under Max C now, unfortunately, which means we can't really afford to pop off. I believe here, we still go for the Taya, actually. We banish the Boxia, summon out a token, so we can use our Vishuda. Yep, there it is. He does, however, have the Splash for it. Very unfortunate. Again, we just needed to get rid of this because until this was gone, he had complete control. The Vishuda, it's a very, very rough situation. We are going to go into the Grandmaster once more. Grandmaster then activating to search our... Oh, it doesn't actually search. Oh, it does. Yes, it does. I'm dumb. I forgot that the Sinister Sovereign has an ability where if you Synchro Summon a worm while he's on the field, you get to draw a card, which is neat. He is going to Ash Blossom our Taya, which is fine. We didn't really have a ton we needed to do with Taya, but, you know, it is what it is. Gonna Grandmaster, search for Emergence, of course, and then we get to draw one extra card. Draw evenly matched, which again isn't super useful, but we are able to grab another Vishuda here. We're going to use Protos, declaring Dark, and passing back to our opponent. Again, we're just trying to keep him down as long as we can so that we can start taking his cards out. Our Sinister Sovereign, unfortunately, does get destroyed. They're going to go for another copy of their field spell, grabbing Visa's Frost from their deck, summoning out Astra. That's going to pop our Grandmaster. Now Visa's Frost is going to pop their Astra to summon itself. That's triggering off the Tri-Heart to summon back the Astra to its own points to. Then Reichardt being added to hand. Reichardt then on summon is going to be swapped to defense, of course. And I don't think he has anything left to search off of Reichardt. We do have Heavenly Dragon Circle, which is fine. We're going to activate this. Banish. So here's our yeah, it's a bit of an awkward one. So we're going to tribute off the Grandmaster. He's going to use the Ash Blossom here, so that's going to negate our Heavenly Dragon Circle. We don't care about that. Our plan was we're going to basically activate this, tribute off the Grandmaster, so that now we're no longer in defense, but it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. We weren't able to really pull anything out here. With our defense being reduced by his cards, he can easily swing over our Protos. There it is, swinging over the 2600, 39 to the face. We're going to go evenly matched, forcing him to wipe the board. But again, we really need whatever card we draw has to win us this game. Otherwise, we just instantaneously blow up. We draw into Maxi, which isn't super helpful, but we can go Vishuda into defense, linking it off into Monk of the Tenyi. This is potentially the comeback here. Heavenly Dragon Circle banishing itself from the graveyard to grab ourselves an Adara from the deck. Now we're going to use the Vishuda in the graveyard. Bouncing Tri-Heart gone. Finally, the Tri-Heart has been dealt with. We're going to banish Adara to grab back Taya. Taya then is going to be normal summoned, on summon, banishing the Strategist from the grave, grabbing ourselves a token. So now we can go into Dragite. That's going to negate a spell or trap card that he plays. Taya milling out the Ashuna. Ashuna then using its effect, banishing itself from the graveyard to summon out the Adara from the deck. We're going to swing in with Dragite and our Monk. We're going to leave our opponent on 400 life points. And it really does come down to whether or not our opponent can summon a monster big enough to take us out over the Monk. He's going to go for Arrival. He's going to bring back the Rykart. We are going to use the Adamantipator Horizon to negate the Arrival. That means that he's whatever card he has to rely on, it is the last card in his hand. It is unfortunately Karas. Karas is going to be able to banish 4 from the grave, bringing out Shureg. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about Shureg banishing our Dragite and claiming lethal damage over our Monk. Very, very, very unfortunate. We had the out there towards the end. There was a couple of stages throughout the game where it would have seemed as though we had the out, but that splash being face up would have really have stopped us. Our opponent played that well. He was really saving that. He knew his win condition was definitely just going to be tryhard beatdown, and he stuck to it. He kept the splash until the very moment at which he would have been negatively impacted by it. So very well played from our opponent. He can't really complain about that. Yeah, let's get into the deck profile. Alrighty, now this deck is rather straightforward, so we are going to be going through this rather quickly. Again, the deck's very strong. I'm a big fan of it. It's rather linear, so it's not that difficult to learn. It is rather beginner friendly, and it definitely has enough versatility to where it's going to remain a viable contender for quite some time, as it has. So starting off with Effect Veiler, Double Veiler, just general sort of hand trap. Also a good cross-out target. Adara. So I'm going to cover all of the Tenyi in one go. So they all have the ability where if you control no effect monsters, you can special summon them to the fields. They also each have an effect that they can activate if you control a non-effect monster. So Adara, if you control a non-effect monster, you can banish it from your hand or graveyard to add back a banished worm to your hand. It's also a level 1 tuner, which makes it useful. Triple Max C, Double Ash Blossom, pretty mandatory. Tenyi Spirit Shifana. Shifana, if a non-effect monster in your field is destroyed, you can banish this card to summon back that non-effect monster to then destroy a card your opponent controls. As a level 4 water non-tuner, it becomes a very valuable target off of Heavenly Dragon Circle. Swordsoul of Mo Yi is your primary starter for the deck. On summon, you get to reveal a Swordsoul or Worm monster card in your hand, summon out a level 4 Swordsoul token, which is a tuner. Of course, that being a level 4 tuner and this being a level 4 non-tuner, you get to go into a level 8 synchro monster. Taya, very similar, except it doesn't summon the token on summon. Instead, you can banish a Swordsoul monster or a Worm monster from your graveyard to summon a Swordsoul token to your field. Again, level 4 non-tuner. They both also have effects that activate when they're sent to the graveyard as material for a synchro summon. Mo Yi will allow you to draw a card. Taya will allow you to send a Worm monster or a Swordsoul card from your deck to the graveyard. Ecclesia. Ecclesia can special summon itself to the field if you don't control any monsters. As a level 4 tuner, that is inherently valuable, but also it can tribute itself as a quick effect to special summon any Swordsoul monster directly from your deck. Usually that's going to be your Mo Yi, so that you can trigger its effect and start summoning tokens. So Ecclesia is definitely one of the best starter cards. I play 3 of it because it helps you go second an awful lot as well. You can play through additional interruptions if you're playing Ecclesia. So yeah, I think 3 Ecclesia is really solid. You can get away with 2, but there's no reason not to play 3. We got the Double Strategist, limited to 2 at the minute. This card should definitely be unlimited. I think Swordsoul is not problematic anymore. It was really powerful once upon a time, but it no longer needs this semi-limit. Give us back our 3rd Strategist, please. Basically, this guy works a little bit differently. You can discard another Swordsoul card or a Worm monster to special summon this guy and a Swordsoul token. This guy's a level 6 non-tuner, which means you can go into some of your level 10 synchro monsters. Whenever this guy is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent, which synergizes well with your Sinister Sovereign because this will inflict a ton more effect damage, so you can actually burn your opponent down quite low and make them easy to finish off. We've got Tenyi Spirits, Vishuddha, and Ashuna as our level 7 non-tuners. You can banish this card from your hand or graveyard if you control a non-effect monster to return a card in your opponent's field back to their hand. And Ashuna can banish itself to special summon a Worm monster or a Tenyi monster, from your deck to the field, but you're locked into worms for the rest of that turn. And like I said, all of the Tenyi monsters can special summon themselves to the field from your hand so long as you don't control any effect monsters. And lastly, for our monsters, we have Protos. Again, a lot of people play multiple copies of Protos. I think 1 is fine. Basically, you special summon this card from your hand by banishing 3 monsters from your field or graveyard that have different attributes. Can't be destroyed by card effects, and once per turn you can declare an attribute on the field. Everything of that attribute gets destroyed, and until the end of your opponent's turn, no monsters of that attribute can be special summoned. It is a really brutal way of locking down any deck that requires specifically dark monsters. In general, it's a very useful effect if you're going second or if it's turn 3. But going first, what you're going to typically do is you're going to declare dark, because none of your boss monsters are dark, meaning none of your cards are getting destroyed, because Protos itself can't be destroyed. And instead, you're going to be locking your opponent out of summoning dark monsters, which means Branded Despia is going to struggle, which means Tearlaments is going to struggle, which means I believe Sky Striker also won't be able to summon their Ray. So there's quite a lot of little bits. I don't know why I mentioned Sky Striker specifically, but you know what I mean. It's just one of those things that comes up. We got triple emergence. You can add a Swordsoul monster from your deck to your hand, or if you control a Synchro monster, you can grab any worm of your choice. Typically, that's how you're going to be searching your deck for Protos. You're going to be using emergence, which is why one copy is fine. Double Call by the Grave and a single Crossout Designator to protect yourself from hand traps. We've got Heavenly Dragon Circle. Basically, as a quick play spell, you can tribute a worm monster to add a worm monster from your deck to your hand, or if the monster you tributed was a non-effect monster, you can instead special summon the card. Primarily, you're going to be using this to protect cards like Moyi and Taya from infinite impermanence and Effect Veiler and things like that by tributing them off to then search your deck for another worm monster. That's why Shifana is so useful. So ideally, if you, for example, normal summon Moyi, Chain Link 1, you activate her effect. Chain Link 2, your opponent activates infinite impermanence. Chain Link 3, you will then chain your Heavenly Dragon Circle, tribute off the Moyi, and search your deck for either one of your level 7s or your Shifana, probably your Shifana, because then once the chain resolves, you'll have a Swordsoul token. You can special summon Shifana, which is a level 4 non-tuner, and you can still go into your Grandmaster and do your full combo. So Shifana is basically only in this deck because of Circle. If you take Circle out, you probably take Shifana out. It also has a graveyard effect, by the way. If you control a non-effect monster, you can banish this card to add a Tenyi card from your deck to your hand, but you can only use one of its effects per turn. Really solid card overall, really like it. Triple evenly matched because it's really good right now. Triple infinite permanence because it's really good. And it's a solid crossout target. And lastly, Swordsoul Blackout. You can target a 1 worm monster you control and up to 2 cards your opponent controls. Not up to, it has to be 2. So 1 worm you control, 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy them. If this card gets banished, you can summon another Swordsoul token. So pretty straightforward. Getting into the extra deck, we have Yazi as a level 7 Synchro monster. Basically, you can pop a card you control and a card your opponent controls. If this card gets destroyed by a card effect, including its own, you can special summon any worm monster from your deck in defense. You're not going to use this card very often, or really at all, to be perfectly honest. It's more useful in other versions of the deck. Let me say that. This card is more useful in other versions of Swordsoul. In this version, you're typically not going to use it very much. Boxia. Boxia on summon, you can target cards on the field up to the number of different attribute monsters that were used for its summon and return them back to the deck. You can also destroy a card you control to revive a level 4 lower monster from your graveyard. Very useful for going into things like your Xingfao or your Xiaofeng and your Sigma later on in the game. Draco Berserker of the Tenyi is a beat stick. If your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish that card so long as it is where it is upon activation. So yeah, it's a mediocre interruption. It's an okay thing. It doesn't come up all the time. It's not always applicable, but it is at least decent, especially into something like Tier. If this card attacks and destroys an effect monster, you can basically gain that monster's attack points permanently and then attack again once per turn, basically. So really awesome card, really aggressive card as well. Generic Synchro monster. Pretty solid. We got Drag Out. So long as you've got a water monster in your graveyard, once per turn you can negate the activation of a spell or trap card. Just a generic spell trap negate. We've got double copies of Swordsoul Grandmaster Shizao. This card's got 2 effects. You can only use one of them per turn. Number 1, if summoned, you can search your deck or banish from your deck a Swordsoul card. Typically, it's going to be your Strategist, or if you've already got Strategist, Emergence, and Emergence will be used to grab Protos. So it just sort of depends on what you have, what you don't have. So we can search on summon. Secondary effect allows you to banish a Swordsoul card or a worm monster from your hand or graveyard to target an effect monster on the field and negate its effects. So it's got an effect, it's got a negate built in as well, which makes it pretty solid. So it searches on summon, and then from the next turn onwards, it can start negating stuff. Xiao Feng, again, another monster you're not going to use very often, but is pretty impactful when it comes up. So when this card, basically your opponent can't activate monster effects of the same attributes of the Yang Xing monsters that were used for this card summon, which is a bit convoluted, but in 99% of cases, you're probably just going to summon it off of Boxia and your Adara. 8+1 gives you 9. So usually, basically, so long as this card's face up, your opponent can't activate light effects. There you go. If this card gets destroyed by battle or card effect, you can grab any tuner from your deck and add it to your hand, including things like Ash Blossom, hand traps, effect veilers, whatever it is. You can basically grab any tuner you want from your deck. You're not really playing very many core tuners, so you're basically grabbing a Dara or a hand trap. So it's a neat effect, but it's definitely not game breaking. Once per turn, when an opponent's monster is destroyed by battle or card effect, special summon a worm monster from your deck in defense whose attribute matches the attribute of one of the destroyed cards. So if you destroy a dark, you summon Vishuddha. If you destroy a light, you summon Ashuna, so on and so forth. Baron de Fleur, generic level 10 synchro monster. Once per turn, pop a card your opponent controls, and once while face up, you can negate the activation of any card. Pretty solid card. Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Qing Ying, one of your boss monsters. For every banished card, this card gains 100 attack and defense and reduces all of your opponent's monsters by 100 attack and defense. If it would be destroyed by a card effect, you can instead banish a card from your graveyard, and should a card be banished while this card is face up once per turn, you get to pick a card on your opponent's field and in their graveyard and banish both. Really solid card. Excellent into certain matchups like Tearlaments, which really don't like their cards being banished. Speaking of, we've got the Swordsoul Sinister Sovereign, whatever that says. If you synchro summon another worm monster, while this card's already face up, you get to draw a card. Pretty neat, a little bit of card advantage. Its main effects though come in with its banishment. If your opponent special summons a monster, or if they activate a spell or trap card, you can banish those and inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent. You can do each once per turn, so one monster and one spell / trap. That's really good against Tearlaments because you want to negate or banish the likes of their Sullik, right? You want to banish the likes of their Kikalos. So being able to target and banish and get rid of very key resources that your opponent has, while also inflicting burn damage to your opponent over time, is very valuable. We've got the Psychic End Punisher, which again is not going to come up very often, but it's one of those cards that it's hard to pass up. The most notable application of this card is going to be in combination with your Heavenly Dragon Circle. So for example, if you were to summon the likes of Mo Yi or Taya or whatever, and you were to use their effects to attempt summoning a token, what you could do then is you would use your Heavenly Dragon Circle to tribute off the card to prevent its effects from being negated, so you still summon your token, and instead of grabbing Shifana, you're instead going to grab one of your Tenyi spirits, your Vishuddha or your Ashuna. That means you now have a level 4 tuner on the board and a level 7 non-tuner that you can instantly special summon because you don't control any effect monsters. So that's how you would summon your Psychic End Punisher. It's basically just a huge out that a lot of decks don't really have a way to deal with very efficiently, and it can just help you turn the tide basically of a bad duel. It's just an option. Speaking of options, we have Geomath Mech Final Sigma. Sometimes you just need an unaffected beat stick, and it's easy enough to summon thanks to Boxia. Boxia popping a card, bringing back a level 4 tuner like Ecclesia will give you instant access to your Sigma. Sometimes Sigma's all you need. Sometimes your opponent's got problematic cards, sometimes they're playing Baguska. This card will get past Baguska, it'll get past whatever. Well, of course, it'll still be flipped to defense if you summon it while Baguska, whatever. Either way, this card is here to deal with problematic floodgates, problematic cards that you otherwise wouldn't really have any outs to. So Geomath Mech Final Sigma I think is a really solid addition. Again, it's niche and it will not come up all the time, but it's probably more applicable in more situations than some of the other synchro monsters that you would play in this spot. Getting into links, we're just running 2 copies of Monk of the Tenyi. You just link summon them into with a non-linked Tenyi monster, so you just turn any of your Tenyis into this, which now means it's a non-effect monster, making all of their effects live, and if that was the only card you controlled at the time, you no longer control an effect monster, meaning you can summon another Tenyi. So it's more of a toolbox sort of utility card. And lastly is Shaman of the Tenyi. You can discard a card to target any worm in your grave to special summon it. Also for the rest of that turn, you can't activate the effects of anything from the extra deck except for Tenyi monsters. So you don't really, this is more of a fallback. You don't want to begin or lead with this card because you're going to lock yourself out of your searches, out of your negates, out of whatever. But Shaman, at the very least, is an excellent recovery option and can really help you out some very niche situations like Baguska. So when an attack is declared involving a non-effect monster, you can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. So that's what I mean by outing things like Baguska. So basically you would try to put a Monk of the Tenyi on board. If you were to swing with your Monk, your Shaman then would activate to pop an opponent's card. Pretty straightforward stuff. And yeah, there's the deck. Like I said, it's not a super complicated deck. I think this is a really beginner-friendly strategy as well, and it's incredibly viable too. So I don't really see any downside to building a Swordsoul deck for the most part. So even moving into this new meta, if, you know, Branded's not your style, or if you're not sure, maybe it's a wee bit too complicated and you want something easier to play, Swordsoul is definitely as strong an option as it's ever been. So I'd recommend it to anybody. So if you got this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, first of all, and if you enjoyed it, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.